If you're a small business owner looking to grow or expand your business, check out OnDeck Business Loans. OnDeck offers business loans online from $5,000 to $500,000, and their simple application process only takes 10 minutes. Unlike banks, they'll give you a decision quickly, and funding is as fast as one day. Get a free consultation with an OnDeck loan advisor. Visit ondeck.com/podcast.
This is the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. Boundaries or burnout, you make the choice. Here's your host, Michael Levitt. 2, 1. Welcome to another episode of the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. It's Michael here, and today I've got a psychotherapist on the line who's also an actor, who's also a writer. Yes, interesting career choices, all in alignment. Jason Eric Ross, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great to be here with you. So how in the world do you have those three careers? Now, my backstory is originally accounting, then IT, and then healthcare executive. So, but still kind of in the office type of world. I mean, your experience seems to be a little bit different. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, how you chose each of those paths and any synergies you find between each of them.
It's a great question. There's definitely some synergies. My first career, which is psychotherapy, I don't know if I chose it so much as maybe it chose me. I'm actually the son of not one, but two psychoanalysts. So I grew up in and around this field. I was even in therapy at a young age. So it kind of made sense to me. My parents also had some businesses around psychotherapy and training. So I kind of gravitated to it and went to grad school. Ultimately, I didn't enter the field for 10 years after. So it came late.
Yeah, well, that's, when you have the influences of your parents, sometimes that, is a driving force for many of us in the career paths that we choose. So how did you then segue from doing that to, let's say writing, I guess, because writing sometimes, is one of those things where you see a lot of people with different experiences will dabble in it, but they may have found it to be their original dream to be a writer of some sort.
Yeah, the writing was something that kind of grew out of high school, but at age 28, I think, somewhere around 28, 29, I helped my mother write a parenting book called You Can Say No and Your Child Will Still Love You, which is in essence my mother's parenting style, her philosophies. So I started with that and then just continued to write on my own. I've written articles on health and fitness, even when I was a trainer. And a couple of years ago, I actually went back to New York and I started studying sketch comedy at Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. And I've written articles and been quoted in articles for Bravo TV, glam.com, usually on, psychotherapy related types of topics. And I'm just something I really enjoy.
Yeah, I love the art form of writing because it allows you to really, flush out what's in your mind and observations that you have from your perspective. That's why whenever I talk with anybody that is thinking about becoming a writer or writing for, various agencies or a guest blog post, I encourage them, write, get that out there because your voice is so unique compared to everyone else's. Your experiences, your background, everything is different than everyone else. So your perspective is not only needed, but it's also something that can really provide some insight to others. So yeah, the acting side of things. Now, your story, it does not sound like you ventured out to LA and, waited tables and, landed that movie spot type of thing, or maybe it did. I'm just curious as to, how acting got into your blood.
Acting was something I wanted to do. I first performed stand-up comedy after I did an audition to be a contestant on a game show from MTV many years ago called Remote Control. It was where Dennis Leary, Colin Quinn, and Adam Sandler kind of got some of their fame. And I auditioned, and then having made the crowd laugh, I decided I wanted to do stand-up comedy. I did it and won a contest or two, and I've done it on and off, in my adult life. I knew I wanted to act, and I put it off in order to go to grad school. And I put it aside, even though I knew I wanted to do it, because I did not think I was ready to go out to LA, wait tables, and do that grind. I just don't know if I had the wherewithal to do it at a younger age. Came about 20 years later that I had more than the wherewithal, and I was willing to take whatever risk to do it. And I basically flew back to New York, and I spent the better part of 2017 getting my feet wet in the acting industry up in New York.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about, acting is it's not just limited to LA anymore. We find actors all across the globe, and with, the media platforms and everything that's out there, it's good. And I remember Remote Control. I used to watch it all the time. So just to, date myself, for those that are wondering, when was that show on? I said, just go on YouTube and look up some episodes. I'm sure they're on there or somewhere online for sure.
Yeah.
So back to the psychotherapist component of it. As in my show, we talk a lot about burnout, and because I had my own burnout experience a decade ago. And I'm curious from your perspective, when clients or patients present to you and they're demonstrating, some significant stress in their life and a variety of other things, when the concept of burnout comes up with them, how do you approach them? Are they aware of it, or are they often so deep in the woods of the challenges that they're facing that they may not realize exactly, what their challenges are, although they're aware that something is definitely going on?
I think there's a mix. I think some people have an idea. I don't know if they necessarily completely understand that they're burned out. What I do with people generally is, even when they start with me, is to take a real wellness model approach and sort of look at where is their physical, emotional, spiritual, social, and intellectual spheres of their life, and how well do they manage them. And the majority of people that I meet don't manage them well. If I ask them to self-score, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, awesome, most people score themselves pretty low. And what we get to is, if that's how you're managing your life, what did you expect to happen? And that sort of breaks it down for them, where they can say, oh, I hadn't thought of it this way.
Yeah, I find that a lot with people that I deal with is, they're going through the motions of life, but they're really not paying attention to how they're living their life, how they're spending their days. I don't want to say they're on autopilot, but they're just almost, I hate to use this phrase, oblivious, but often it kind of mimics that, where they're just completely unaware of how they're spending their life and what they're doing, the choices that they're making, and everything, even to the point where they're so lost that they forget who they are and why they chose the field they chose, or the partner that they have, or their decisions that they've made to where they are right now. They just are completely baffled by how they got where they are. And I see that a lot with people that are just extremely burned out. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to return them back to the foundation of who they are. And it's not something that, as I tell people, with burnout, it's not something that happens overnight, and you wouldn't expect to be able to rectify it overnight. But, a common goal, and I'm sure it's a technique that you use, is, okay, let's look for, or using a medical phrase, okay, let's stop the bleeding first. Okay, well, now we got that under control. Let's start going through and figuring out, like you said, with your exercise, of, how are all of these components of your life working together? Or are they? Do you have them completely siloed off to the point where nothing is connecting? And then no wonder you are in the state that you're in, because you're completely out of alignment. If you dislocate a shoulder, then yeah, there's something that's not in alignment. But if your entire emotional life is completely segmented, yeah, it's a wonder you can get up and tie your shoes some days.
That's right. And some people don't want to look at the fact that they're having trouble with that.
Yeah, I find that too with, and I work a lot with executives, and that's one area where I think pride comes in a little bit. And oftentimes too, they are what I like to refer to as the type A personalities that are very driven and have been extremely successful in their life. And again, they've been slowly building up to this burnout state because they were so driven to be their best that they expected of themselves. And sometimes when things get a little bit more challenging as you rise up through the corporate world, then they still want that success. So it takes longer, and sometimes they don't know how to delegate. So they start missing out on things at home, and it just goes into a very nasty spiral effect where it kind of tumbles like a deck of cards after a while with some of these people.
That's exactly right. And they didn't know where it came from, and then they have trouble stopping it. So what I try to teach people for the most part is how to manage their life in a different way so they could potentially avoid burnout.
And what are some techniques you think have been successful for some of these people? I mean, I don't know if you would, in your opinion, would it depend on their walk of life, or is it pretty much standard with all of us?
I mean, I think some part of it's fairly standard. I think personality matters a lot. That's for sure. I think at the same time, people have to be mindful of with that personality, what is it that they have to be aware of that's getting in their way? Is it their ego? Is it their arrogance? That's something they always have to consider, and people don't do that enough. But if they don't manage those 5 spheres, they're going to have problems. And most people struggle to get life balance in the first place.
Yeah, it's all those things get out of alignment for one reason or another. And if it's during a season, that's one thing. But when it starts lasting months and then years, then you have a huge situation on your hands, and could have significant ramifications with your health, your family life, spiritual life, you name it. Everything would be impacted by it. And using the card analogy again, you can go from the top to the bottom in an instant just because you weren't taking care of yourself. And that is something that I've seen way too often, and we continue to see it, which is alarming. So if you were going to tell people one thing to help them prevent having burnout in the first place, I'm guessing it would be, focus on those 5 spheres, but anything else?
Well, I think within those 5 spheres, it's important to understand that the spiritual and emotional are really important, and people often lack in those areas. So that's one piece. And again, you could juxtapose that against just overall general self-care. And I think people want to tell themselves a story that they're doing a great job when they're not. If I ask the average person, how's your nutrition? How's your diet? The number one answer I get is not bad. That's their answer, not bad, versus it's really good. It's really good would be the appropriate answer, because your body is like a car and you got to fuel it properly. It's like the first form of self-care that you can do is what you take in. But most people don't do that well. So I ask them, how's your diet? And they say, it's okay, not bad. My general question to them after that is, if that's how you judged your sex life, would that be acceptable? And most people, the answer is no. They're not happy with that answer.
Of course not. No, they want the high octane. You're paying $1 more a gallon for this stuff when it comes to that. And again, yeah, you nailed it right on the head. And I find too, with people that are too busy to take care of themselves, which is just frustrating, like to no end for me, is okay. If your nutrition is consisting of rolling down your window and talking into a speaker, then going up to another window and paying for it, and then going to the third window to retrieve the brown bag of whatever's in that bag. There should be a fourth window that you can, which has a garbage can in it, because you can just put it in there and throw it down there, because that's exactly what you're consuming. And there are people that's their breakfast, their lunch, and often their dinner, because they've allocated so much time to working that's what they're doing. They're eating fast food, and it's not food, and it's going to catch up with them sooner than later.
That's right. And in a really bad way. I tell most people, you have to do the work if you want to be able to complain, and you can't complain until you've done the work. And very often people get stuck in this mindset where they can complain, they think wherever they want, and they wonder why they don't get more production. They don't wonder why they don't do better. They're not more effective. And ultimately, many do have burnout, depression, I think those signs are really critical. So what you take into your body is going to have a great effect on what the outcome is. And I think so many people are burned out already because we're a society that often self-medicates before we'll do self-care.
Yeah, and it's a Band-Aid approach. And if you take care of yourself properly in the first place, getting the proper nutrition, activity, rest, all of those things, you are fueling your body to be at its optimum best. And when you do that, surprise, surprise, the other things that you want to improve in your life will start happening. It's not a magic pill. It's you put in the work, it will turn around and it will happen for you. When it happens. But if the worst case scenario of the situation is you're healthier and you feel better and you live longer and you get to spend more time with family and loved ones and friends because you're taking better care of yourself, that's a pretty good deal. I'll sign up for that 10 times out of 10.
That's correct. And that's what people have gotten away from is I think we've gotten so caught up into having things. We're in a society that has more depression, more mental health issues than ever before. Something's wrong. And what we're not looking at is how we get better, how we grow. And people are getting stuck. And that's why we're seeing these unbelievable rates of mental health issues.
Yeah, and it's just going to increase as our population continues to age. And, for many live longer. But we're seeing, I was in the healthcare sector for well over a decade and saw, quite a spike of mental health challenges amongst our senior population. And we know that, in the next, well, actually less than 20 years, our, population over age 65 is expected to double. So if you do the math of where we are right now, not doing anything else, you're going to double the number of people that are having mental health challenges and nutrition issues and all of those things. No healthcare system on the planet is going to be able to meet that need unless we do some things now. So it's well overdue. And I think people need to return to the foundation of taking care of themselves first and really making sure that they're focusing on their health, both mental, physical, spiritual, everything. And once they do that, then they won't have to take those things in a bottle. Because they'll be taking care of themselves through the nutrients and everything else that they consume.
That's right. The prevention has got to improve. I mean, if we want things to get better, prevention has to improve.
Yeah.
And I think everybody does. I think we've got into a setup where people aren't exactly excited or happy to do the work. And ultimately, that's what we really need to be doing is that work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Jason, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Anybody wants to find me, best place is on any social media at Jason Eric Ross. That's my handle, I think, for everything social media wise. Or they can go to my website, jasonerickross.com.
Awesome. And we'll have that information in the show notes. So Jason, great to finally connect with you. I know we've been trying to line this up since last fall. And because I looked at the emails, I'm like, wow, I've been trying to line this up with it. And of course, I more or less took the last 6 weeks off of 2018 and that put a wrinkle in, not just in this show, but pretty much everybody else. So I'm still,
good for you.
It was good. I needed to do it, but it was still one of those things where I'm having conversations like, well, when did I connect with them originally? And I look and I see October. I'm like, oh, that's too long. I got to get caught up. So I appreciate your patience and thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, everybody, be well. Hey, it's Michael again. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you're like many people, you're dealing with some significant stress and possibly approaching burnout. I know how you feel. In 2009, my burnout led to a year of worst-case scenarios. I do not want that to happen to you. If you go to breakfastleadership.com, you can register for a free webinar on burnout prevention, as well as get a free checklist to have successful mornings. Start off each day the right way. Again, that's at breakfastleadership.com. Also, since you are a loyal podcast listener, I'm asking you to like, rate, and review my podcast on iTunes. I look at all the reviews and appreciate your comments, and it helps other potential listeners discover the content I have on the show. I appreciate you, and thanks again for listening.